Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you all for coming to our first committee meeting. I think that we've got some exciting work ahead of us. So we're going to just start today and kind of give an overview of what's coming up. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Ellie Gilbert. I'm the Assistant Director in the Division of Educator Recruitment and Development. And my cohort today is Bree Massey, and she's going to be running the slide. She's our consultant who's in charge of the teaching and learning pathway. We'll get around to some more introductions in just a moment, but today begins our focused conversation on mid-career teacher attrition. Our goal is not to solve everything today. We're just going to ground ourselves in the research, the Kentucky specific data, and practitioner insights so that we can start to develop thoughtful evidence-based recommendations. So we're talking about mid-career teachers, and we're generally referring to those with 5 to 15 years of experience. And they're often the instructional backbone of our schools. They're confident in their craft. They mentor others, and they contribute to the school culture. When we lose them, we lose stability, and we lose leadership capacity. And today and the next two meetings after this are really about understanding why that loss happens and what we might be able to do to shift it. So we are going to get started with introductions. So you can go to the next slide. And today, I just want you guys to share your name, your current role, and one factor that you think might be behind the mid-career teachers leaving the profession. And so we'll just kind of go around. I can't really see where everybody is on this, but just pop off mute, introduce yourself, and share what you think might be one of those reasons that teachers are leaving the profession.
I'll pop off and go first. My name is Amber Hinkle. This is my 21st year in Bell County Schools at Yellow Creek School Center. I teach special education K through 8. I'm kind of like the department lead, and I also specialize in 5 through 8 social studies as well. One of the factors that I think that people leave mid-career is just like we're going through with this insurance thing right now. I think, in the profession of education, we always have to fight for our pension, fight for our insurance, fight for our raises. And a lot of the new students, we've got several new students, not new students, but new teachers at Yellow Creek. And I think a lot of those are wanting to jump midship because of what they're seeing coming down the pipeline. They don't know how to handle the stress of what's going on in Frankfort, though we have those of you at KDE and other organizations fighting for us, but they don't feel, I don't know, empowered, I guess I should say. And they're kind of just, some of them, not at my school only, but other counties that I help work with too, they feel like they're thrown to the wolves. There's not enough mentorship anymore. They're just kind of thrown into everything.
Thank you.
So Ellie, next up we have Suzanne on the list that I can see.
Oh, perfect.
Suzanne, we cannot hear you. I do see that your microphone is on, but we are not getting any sound. No sound yet. So you may want to try exiting and rejoining. So if that we'll come back to you. I apologize. So we'll try to help behind the scenes with your sound, but I think next up we have Dr. Fletcher.
Robbie Fletcher, Commissioner of Education. I think a factor that influences mid-year career teachers to leave the profession is, I think a lot of our mid-year teachers, or I'm sorry, mid-career teachers look for other opportunities, maybe outside the classroom. That could be as a guidance counselor, it could be at others. But also, too, I think that in that mid-year career, sometimes people feel like they need a change. There could be factors that are going on inside of a classroom. There could be other factors. But I think that in many careers, including teaching, when you've been there for maybe 10, 15 years, you start looking for other things. And again, as was pointed out earlier, there's a lot of times that we feel like as an educator that we have to fight some unnecessary fights as it relates to whether it be from healthcare, things of that nature too. So I would agree with that also. But again, I think a lot of times, just like so many other careers, people look for, okay, am I ready for what's next? And they need maybe that little bit of a fire to come back, and sometimes that may be just in a switch in a job.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. Who's up next?
Suzanne, do you want to try again?
Yeah, I'll try again. Is it working?
Yeah.
Okay. I was gonna say if it doesn't work, Teams does not like me. And so I have to go through Firefox. It won't work on my school computer at all, but I'm using my personal computer and it usually works through that. So okay. I heard the tail end of what Commissioner Fletcher was saying, but like just that, like I think that what I was trying to say about what Amber said too is that like immediately I think about, so often really it comes down to respect, that like I think people for whatever reason aren't feeling the profession is treated like a profession and respected as a profession. Some of that is external factors that we can't control, but there are things that I think we can control that keep people in the profession within our districts and states, which are opportunities for them to continue to grow and lead and really feel the impact of their work and some like continuous challenge, whether that's, I don't know if that's what you were saying, Commissioner Fletcher, about like changing some roles and doing some things like that, but it can also be even if it's not leaving the classroom because they don't want to leave the classroom, like some leadership in some ways within a current role that they have and things like that. So anyways, that's my 2 cents.
Perfect.
Excellent. Preston, you're next on my list.
Okay, I'm Preston Graves. I am a special education teacher that specializes in 3rd grade in my building. I would say a factor that I believe influences mid-career teachers to leave their profession would be student behaviors and the way that administration deals with them. That could be if they're actually dealing with it, if they're not, if they're brushing off their plate, things like that, as well as everything that's put onto our plates. I feel like more things are put onto our plate and not any extra time is given to deal with those things.
Thank you. Jamika?
Yes, can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'm traveling, so I'm in kind of a weird environment trying to get on, but I did want to, my name is Jamika Howard, Dr. Jamika Howard. I'm an elementary principal currently. This is the end of my 23rd year in education in Kentucky. I was a teacher, a school counselor, an assistant principal in middle and elementary school. And I have been the principal and a teacher and an administrator in CSI schools. And so I wanted to say that what Suzanne and Preston said has been a lot of my experience. What I have seen and experienced with teachers is as their career goes on, they want more opportunities to lead, they want their voice to be heard, but also some teachers, especially the ones that are really strong, will get extra responsibilities, and also the students who are a little bit harder to manage. And then another piece of that is as folks age, their families change, right? But when I first started teaching, I didn't have any children. And then later on you do, and you need a little time off here, you need things here. And again, really what I have seen and what has been successful for me as a principal is to that human element. So at my school, we have like 90% retention. Our teachers don't leave, but it's because it's something we have, intentionally invested in. And so I do think that leadership and the way that they respond to the teachers changing. And also I think this isn't like mid-career, but the loss of K2 kind of hit us hard as educators because we don't, a lot of schools, unless you intentionally put in place, they don't have a mentorship program or even anything that is adjusted for the changing needs, right? So like, okay, I want to get out of the classroom, but I don't know what kind of degree to get. And those types of things I've had experience with teachers having questions and concerns about in the middle of their careers.
Thank you.
Okay, next up is Justin.
All right. Can you hear me? All right,
Yes.
I'm coming live from a Buc-ee's parking lot, which I think is appropriate because I will talk about teacher pay and Buc-ee's pay and the correlation there. But I teach 8th grade social studies in Simpson County and also serve on EPSB. And I would just want to ditto everything that everyone's been saying. I think teacher pay is obviously a factor. When you see and know and feel as a teacher the amount of work and effort that you put into your job, and it's not a job, it's a career, it's a passion, you've dedicated your life to it, and to see other jobs, and not to downplay any, but you get gas at Buc-ee's and you see the cost of what they're paying their assistant managers there, and you're like, well, man, I could be making a lot more in this profession. And it's not the baggage that you take home at the end of the day. So teaching doesn't stop at 3 o'clock, but you're still thinking about your students and what can I do and to prepare for the next day. So I ditto all of the things that have been said, that things keep being added to our plates, but never an opportunity for us to pause to see what is on our plate that isn't effective, and being asked to take things away from the plate is a novel idea that we could think about. But then also, like Dr. Fletcher was saying, you wanting a mid-career change, but then oftentimes within the teaching profession, the only way that you can have that career change, at least for what we have in place right now, is to move out of the classroom. And so to take an administrative role or to take a central office role or something else in education. And so really, I think if we were to be able to look at teacher ladder, moving up the teacher ladder and having different opportunities so that our good teachers stay in the classroom but have an opportunity to demonstrate leadership, demonstrate advanced degrees, which a lot of our teachers do, but they're only getting to demonstrate those advanced degrees with the small students that they see on a daily basis, and not getting to actually mentor if their degree is in literacy, they're performing those literacy and what they've learned under their expertise of literacy, but only to their students, and not really getting to mentor or have the time to do that to the whole school or to the whole faculty. So I agree with everything everyone's been saying.
Excellent points.
We have 2 Taras, so let's go with Tara Martin first, please.
Hey everyone, Tara Martin, Supervisor of Instruction for Glasgow Independent Schools. And I think probably on top of all the other factors that have been mentioned, something to consider is, the things that we ask our teachers to do on a daily basis that go beyond just teaching, providing education, and not giving them all the resources that they need. In fact, I think if you look at the latest results of the Impacts Kentucky Working Conditions Survey, that was the area that had the lowest percentage of favorable responses, is that teachers just don't feel like they have all the resources that they need to effectively do their job. And job satisfaction is huge. If people don't feel satisfied in what they're doing, that they're making an impact, they're going to go look elsewhere to where they might have, something different where, they do have all those resources in their hands. So I think that's one thing to consider as well.
Thank you. Tara Rodriguez.
Hello, I'm Tara Rodriguez. I'm the I'm a division director at the Kentucky Department of Education, and just after going through some of the materials in the folder, I remember that working conditions was high on the list, so that's the one I will select.
Thank you. Leslie.
Hello, I'm Leslie McKinney, a former educator and administrator, and currently I'm a researcher and strategic data analyst with the Department of Education, and concur with everything I've heard thus far, but I probably would like to add a little bit to what Jamika said, which is I think by that mid-career, we're seeing people probably beginning to settle down, start families, and maybe home work-life balance is not as easy as potentially it was when they first started, maybe fresh out of college, if they went into college straight out of high school. And that being said, I think really thinking about overall teacher well-being, their mental and emotional bandwidth to do what they need to do, and then the workload that's associated with that, and also tying back to that work and home life balance. So, but I agree with everything I've heard so far. Thank you.
Thank you. And Renee.
Hello, I'm Renee Scott, and I work for the Division of Educator Preparation and Certification, and primarily with the Kentucky Educator Placement Service. And I agree with everything that's been said too, but I really agree with Justin. I think opportunities for teachers to lead in the classroom and not lead the classroom is one of the reasons that influence mid-career teachers to leave the profession. So if we could create more opportunities for them to lead, I think that would be a way to prevent them from leaving the profession.
Thanks, Renee. And the others on the call are the amazing staff from the Office of Educator Licensure and Effectiveness. So Ellie, I think that is all of the introductions.
All right. Well, I took some notes and kind of made some little check marks and heard a lot of things about too much on teachers' plates, work-life balance being a big issue, and the need for opportunities for leadership that don't require teachers to stop teaching. So we had lots of good stuff, and all of that is very well backed up in all of the research that we have. So we will have plenty of good things to talk about. But I'm hearing some alignment already, so that's great. So Bree, if you want to hit the next slide. Before we go any deeper, I want to ground us in the purpose of this research practice collaborative. So this is a project that is between the Kentucky Board of Education and the Education Professional Standards Board. It's kind of guided through the Division of Educator Recruitment and Development, and we've included some other partners as well. So we have active classroom teachers, administrators, just folks that know this issue personally and deeply. So I think it's going to be a really great opportunity for us to kind of sit at the intersection of research and practice. And so we can read and we can study and we can know all the good information, but until we can put it into practice and have some solid policy and system change recommendations, that research doesn't really help us. So this is the good part, the practice that we want to put this into. So we're not just reviewing the literature, but we're also looking at our particular Kentucky context. We're looking at identifying some actionable recommendations. And in the folder that I shared with you, there is a document that's the executive summary. It's kind of our end goal. And that one, it does ask us to kind of identify our key findings, root causes, and then 2 recommendations. And so that's kind of just to give you, in my old teacher world, kind of give you a picture of what the end of this is going to look like. That's kind of what we're going for, is to come up with at least 2 recommendations from our group that are realistic and that we can actually find some teeth maybe that we can implement. So we're looking at that research packet that you received. We're looking at Kentucky data. We have a whole lot of data in Kentucky. We're listening to what teachers say, and we want to know what can policy what changes can we make in policy to maybe move this forward. So just to kind of go on to the next slide, we want to talk about our norms for this. I don't think that you guys are such an awesome group. I don't think we'll have to discuss this at length, but we do want to respect all the voices. Everyone here comes from a different background, different context, and everyone's an expert in this area. So respect the voices, stay purpose focused, use evidence and experience. And I heard that already in our sharing earlier. Be constructive and concise. Always assume positive intent. Honor our time, and I will always be the one who starts at 4 o'clock and ends on time, if not earlier. And if you are able to put your camera on, if you are traveling, we don't want you to do that. Be safe first, but if you're able to put your camera on, that's great. So let's go on to the next slide and get right into the meat of our discussion. So our guiding question: what are the primary factors contributing to mid-career teacher attrition in Kentucky? And what targeted strategies might help retain experienced teachers during this critical phase of their career? This feels a little bit like the old days when I was a classroom teacher and I coached future problem solving. So it's very much like that. We're going to examine what we know to be true and think about how we can solve that problem. So there are two components: identifying the factors, and that's really looking at what their research says, and then identifying targeted retention strategies. And that's going to be a little bit more of the creative lift from us. So nationally, research tells us that teacher shortages are driven more by attrition than by a lack of a pool of candidates. It's folks are leaving and we don't have folks to fill that place. About 16% of teachers turn over annually. And about half of those folks are leaving entirely. They're not moving to a different school. They're not moving to a different position. They're out of teaching altogether. So this work is fundamentally about retention. We can recruit and recruit and recruit, but if we continue to lose them at 5, 7, 8 years, we're just filling that bucket that has a hole in it. Mid-career teachers sit between those early career supports. And we did hear about, how KTIP has really impacted those folks, that we don't have good supports in place universally anymore. And then we have the folks at the end of retirement. So these are the people that are in the middle, and we deserve to kind of focus our attention on them. So if you'll look at the next slide. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to examine this research. I sent you a folder full of goodies. If you didn't want to read the whole thing, we did have them summarized for you. One of the things I really liked was each article that was summarized had some really good key Kentucky implications that how we can align that with our Kentucky research. I really liked that. We're going to develop some evidence-based recommendations, and we're going to look at systems that are in place that we can change, conditions that are in place, and policies that are in place. And then we're going to document all that. We have our great little handy organizer that we're going to use. And today we're really just looking at examining the research. So let's go on to the next slide. What stood out to you from the readings? And you guys can just pop on and share, but what did you notice? Was any of it a surprise to you, or did you kind of notice some recurring themes? I'll kind of hold off on telling you what I noticed until I hear from you guys, but you tell me what you noticed from our readings. Tara.
I thought the part about the alternate paths to certification and, who the different kinds of people that are more likely to go through one pathway than the other and their retention. I thought all that information was really interesting. For example, like the Teach for America had a very high attrition rate early on, whereas some of those, I think I remember that some of those, even the non-traditional pathways, they still had a very high retention rate. So I thought that was interesting and it was different than what I really expected.
Yeah, that was interesting. Anybody, anything else that stood out? Anybody notice anything about working conditions that was highlighted in the research? Anything around working conditions? We have our impact data that we can look at what people say in Kentucky, but just across the board, anything that we recall?
If I were the Tara Martin, if I remember correctly, like a lot of the things that we talked about just a few minutes ago in our introductions are the very same things that they mentioned in one of those articles. I was trying to pull it up on my computer. I think it's the first one, teacher turnover, why it matters and what we do about it. You know, the working conditions seem to be the critical finding, the one that kept coming up over and over again. And that if teachers are dissatisfied with their working conditions, whether that's the workload, the compensation, if they feel like they're not, and we all know that teachers should be paid more. If it's, low administrative support or poor administrative support, if they're just not provided with opportunities to advance their own learning and their own leadership development, if they're wanting to go that route, that can obviously lead to them finding another profession.
Yeah. And one of the things like the second article, strategies for attracting and retaining educators, it does talk about how competitive salaries and benefits are linked to higher retention. But I think too, some of the research says like the higher pay is great, but the conditions maybe matter a little bit more, like that you can't quantify those necessarily, but they do matter. Teachers will be, no, I'm not going to say it. Never mind. I told you I was going to try to stick to my script, but I do think that when they're happy in their workplace, the salary is less of a motivator. When they're less happy in their workplace, they're willing to be less happy for more money. So I guess that was kind of what I wanted to get at on that one. But anything else?
Sorry, Justin.
Well, I was just going to say, Elliot, I think one of the things about, and I know it's not necessarily the retention lens, and so I know I know that's not our focus here, but like trying to get and recruit careers of others who are in their mid-career. And it's really hard to do that when you start at the very beginning of a teacher's salary, is the only pushback that I would give, is to say that you were mid-career in the business world and you were making X amount of dollars and then you start at the very bottom. And so I do think that's not necessarily our research focus, but I think that's somebody else's. But I do think that's hurting us too.
That's true, that it is not lateral at that mid-career. If you're 40 and you're leaving your profession to come into the teaching field, you're definitely at a disadvantage because you're making what a 22-year-old might also make. So that is definitely, it's not lateral. Someone else had something?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, from my experience and the conversation we're having, I also wasn't surprised in the working conditions that the lowest rating for mid-career is often that emotional aspect, the emotional well-being. And that I think that question didn't appear until COVID. And I was a principal at the time, which was a really hard time. And I think there's other people that probably were a principal at the time, but it was a horrible time to be a principal because the secondary trauma that teachers have is significant, and then it just kind of is exponential the more kids you're dealing with. So principal turnover is even higher and worse than teacher turnover, for sure. But that was and we're seeing that those numbers are better than they were, but they're still not where we want them to be.
Sure. That was one thing in the research that I tried to think about. Was some of this research is a little old. It's the pre-COVID research, and then we have some that's fresher and newer, and it's post-COVID. And I do think that we are looking at like almost apples and oranges there with that time shift. So that's definitely something to keep in mind, that we are seeing a lot more emotional well-being issues in this era than maybe 10 years ago. Anything else? I think professional growth was definitely something in there that popped up, is that you have folks who have become really confident and strong instructors, but they don't want to be a principal. I never wanted to be a principal. That was not my thing, but I loved working with new teachers. And so getting to mentor teachers through KTIP was awesome. That was a great outlet for me as a mid-career teacher. That's not something, I mean, we do still have mentorships, but we don't monetize those the way that we did, back in the olden days. So, what about growth opportunities for mid-career teachers? Do you have any thoughts from the research around that? Not that. What about leadership quality? That's definitely one of the strongest predictors of retention, having a strong instructional leader, even more than things like class size or poverty levels or anything else that might influence the way the school's culture works. Leadership is a big one. So anything about how leadership might influence mid-career teachers in their decisions to stay or to leave?
You've got Leslie, Ellie.
Okay,
You can go ahead, Leslie.
Hi, thank you. Yes, tied to the leadership, I think one of the things that really stands out is the importance of teachers feeling heard, like they have a voice, like they're part of the decision making and not just sort of told what decisions are going to happen, and then feeling valued. And I think all of those were tied really closely to what folks are looking for in their leadership, to help them sustain. And I think also that ties into the previous one, which are professional opportunities while still staying in the classroom. And some interesting research that I had read that made me think of it in tandem with what you provided was how folks are getting creative about that. For example, keeping teachers in the classroom 80% of the day, but allowing them 20% of the day to go to other schools and coach and be curriculum leads in other schools within their district, and sort of just allowing them opportunity to still teach the majority of the day, but to get sort of their fix by helping other schools within their district, but also in just growing themselves in their own practice. So just a thought of some things that were connection to some of the research that you provided as well.
Yeah. And I think those creative solutions are what we are really going to have to draw upon to solve this, because what we've been doing isn't really helping us. We've got to come up with something new. So anything else around the research before we move into some of the Kentucky specific data? Well, all right, we'll move on to Kentucky specific data. All right, so what do we know based on Impact Kentucky survey, state interviews, and we'll talk a little bit about those in a moment. The exit surveys, the reports from the Coalition to Sustain the Profession, and the Commonwealth Education Continuum, all those have been focused specifically on Kentucky teachers. What are some things that we know or are interested in knowing more about? I'll tell you when.
Go ahead, Tara. Oh, Ellie.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Tara, if you want. Okay. Thank you.
I don't remember which of these it was in, but one of them was talking about how, one issue is that teaching is not seen, students see their teachers being disrespected or the community not really supporting teachers. And one of the recommendations from one of these reports was to do some kind of publicity campaign to, I guess to basically elevate and talk about how important teaching is and so on, to try to communicate its importance to society, basically.
Yeah, I think that was the Commonwealth Education Continuum, maybe. I think that might have been their report. Yeah. And we're, at KDE, we have our Go Teach KY campaign, which we started in 2019, but has really gotten some traction this year. Thanks to some money that the commissioner found to get us some billboards and TV commercials. We've been getting out into the schools and just really kind of doing a surprise and delight. We take some goodies to teachers, and it's just, they feel really, just appreciated, I guess. And so that elevating the profession is so important. I cannot emphasize that enough. A couple of pieces of data that I want to point out. The Kentucky Exit Survey, which in a real short form, it was legislated that all schools would administer a exit survey for teachers who leave, and we would collect the data. There's a lot of different ways that we could do that. We have a form that they can use. If they have different data, they can submit that. The problem is that when people are leaving, they don't necessarily want to complete an exit survey. So, they're leaving, they may not want to do it. So the data is not super consistent all the time. But in the mid-career band, work-life balance was the #1 reason teachers in Kentucky said that they were leaving. Number 2 was the school culture. Number 3 was the workload, which is kind of work-life balance adjacent. The 4th one was leadership style, and the 5th one was appreciation, which I think might tie back into leadership style and school culture. So it's kind of all very related to work-life balance and the school culture, kind of the two when it comes down to. So I just kind of want you to think about that. That is the folks who are leaving who will complete the survey and share that. That's what they're saying. And it aligns pretty well with national research. I think the Coalition to Sustain the Profession did another study that they just interviewed, kind of did a survey, didn't do interviews, but they did a survey, and they had like 700 plus responses from Kentucky teachers. And they said their biggest challenges were student behavior, pay and compensation, lack of administrative support, and overwork. So it all kind of sounds the same when you hear it. It's just different work, using different terms to kind of describe similar things. But student behavior really cropped up in that one a lot. So thinking about work-life balance and school culture, any thoughts on the data that we have in Kentucky around this? We have a lot, and it's really pretty good. Justin.
I mean, just thinking about the work-life balance, and thinking about pay, right? So I'm trying not to always go back to pay, but if if you knew you were doing a job and it was 60 hours a week and you were getting paid for the 60 hours a week, I think you would go into it being okay with it. But it's the work-life balance of, okay, society as a whole, even maybe even your admin team, it's like, okay, it might be from 7:30 to 3:30 is your contracted hours, but there's never enough time in the day to do all the things that are expected. So when people say, oh, you have your planning period, which is oftentimes taken up by PLCs or ARC meetings or 504 meetings, or there's a list of responsibilities, you're being taken advantage of. I don't know how else to say it. Like, it's that teachers are being taken advantage, and because we've willingly done that, I think over the generations, like, it's been okay. It started out maybe okay, but then when we get, a General Assembly this time that has over 200 bills pertaining to education, which they're going to throw on, some of them will be thrown on to us, where we have to figure out a way that we're going to add this resource or that resource. And so I think it's not just teachers, but the system as a whole, understanding, like, what are we expecting our teachers to do with what time they have to do during the daytime. And so I think, like, teachers know that, but I think it's communicating that to society as a whole. How do we actually, like, what is a healthy work-life balance? Because I do think even our younger generations are coming out thinking, oh, well, I only am going to, I'm going to respect my healthy boundaries, which I know I feel like I need to respect my healthy boundaries more than I do. But they're saying, hey, at 3:30, I'm done. That's my contracted time. And then that brings up a whole nother issue of other teachers trying to pick up the slack from others. So I think it's, if everybody can get onto this work, what does a healthy work-life balance in education look like? And everybody getting on the same page. I think that might help some, maybe.
That is such an important question.
Well, and I also think, Justin, I don't know if I'm agreeing, I'm not sure if this is in agreement with what you were saying or not, but I also think, like, as an administrator, say, like, I get a new teacher and they're, like, out the door and the kids are leaving and not doing any of the work they need to do to be prepared for the next day. It's like, I don't know where this mindset comes in that you think this is a punch clock job. Like, this is a salaried position. If you're going to do this well, you may have to do things outside of your workday based on the needs of your students or your experience with being prepared. Like, a first year teacher is going to have to put in some extra work. And I don't know, like, I think part of that is when I say that, like, we need to treat teaching like a profession, part of that is, a white collar positions is not a punch clock job either. And that, like, but teachers are not typically, we're not paid the same as people that are in a lateral experience, like you were saying, mid-career. So that's the difference. The disconnect is that the pay and the respect are often more in line with a punch clock job, but it's not really a punch clock job. You're taking a lot of the emotional burden home with you, and also often some work home with you outside of the workday. Realistically, I know there's things that teachers shouldn't have on their plate that they do, and to make that easier, and there's a lot that could be made easier, but at the same time, I think it's a mindset shift too, of, like, just understanding it's not realistic. I don't know of anybody that can get it all done and never work outside of the contract hours.
No, I wholeheartedly agree with you. I think it can be frustrating for those mid-level career teachers who see new generations, and maybe old generations too, coming in and saying, I'm going to leave at the end of the workday, and I am not. And ultimately, we're getting paid the same, right? So there's no difference in the teachers who are giving it absolutely everything versus those teachers who are leaving at 3:30. And I hear you from a principal perspective that, it doesn't sound like that's happening in your school, but that's happening in other schools throughout
Right.
the state, where there's
So-
not a Go ahead.
that could also be a leadership thing of like,
Yeah.
do you have a culture where you're letting that happen?
Yes.
Yes, and like I said,
Well,
the
and
question is, what does it look like to have a healthy balance? Because we are going to have more work to do. That's just the nature of it. But do we have, 6 hours a night, or do we have an hour? What's healthy?
Well, and something that I want to add is that there is I'll just use the word misconception or disconnect between why teachers are being asked to do some of the things they're being asked to do. So, for example, in any other job, like if I was a bus driver, I would have to have continuing education. I would have to go to, do some training hours or re-qualify on my CDL or things like that in order to be able to do my job effectively. What I've encountered is some teachers who have the misconception about things like PLC and things like some of the meetings, for example, at my school that we have for teachers. It is to improve your practice. It is to make you a better educator. And at your job, if I worked at Brown-Forman, I'd be producing bourbon. I work at a school, I produce good people. We have the best people in the world, and it is our job to be at the forefront of the research and have the best practice to be able to ensure that each child that enters our building is better than when they entered. And so when you encounter an educator who doesn't have that mindset, it's like, this is something that I'm being told to do versus this is something that's going to improve my practice. And I love the Danielson framework because I use that and show them, hey, these are expectations of what you do. But I also balance that by hiring extra special area teachers so that my teachers don't have to miss their planning period to come to PLC. But then if the budget changes, that goes away. The flip side of that is you have people who are, spoiled, or where they have a contract that protects them from having to do some extra work, and then they weaponize that when it comes time to do something that is, again, an improvement to your career. And the teachers who are really working hard, as Justin said, it's very difficult because you have to pick up the slack, right? It's like the kids don't go away. Whose kids are these? They're everybody's kids. So if my partner is not putting in the work, and I am, even if we're collaborating and they're using my plans, it's still an inequity. And so there are a lot of different factors at different places, but I do think that mindset, and maybe even someone said, if you enter the career and say, hey, you're going to be doing this, and the hours you're working aren't just in this building. But there are quite a few, there is a different mindset, I believe, in some newer teachers. I'm protecting my time. I said, well, do you like money? And, those conversations have to happen because, again, some of them don't understand that. But it is a struggle, I think, for those teachers who are digging in and working really hard when they have to work with folks who are not doing their part. But that work has to be done because ultimately those children have to learn.
Ellie, I have a comment, if you don't mind.
Yes.
I think the most difficult part about work-life balance is the fact that that's individually defined. Each person has their own view of what a healthy work-life balance looks like. I'm not the best person to ask about a healthy work-life balance, especially as a teacher, principal, or otherwise. But that's such a difficult thing to say. I think for us that, what we should expect of teachers, we expect you to do the work that is related to your profession. And when I say your profession, of how you're impacting students. As a principal, what I try to do is remove any other administrative type burdens I was giving to teachers that was over and above that made an impact in the classroom. So I think that if we can look at ways that, okay, we want teachers to be focused on their classroom, and one of the things Mr. Mitchell pointed out is like protecting some of that time. You know, I can't tell you how many times that I've asked teachers to cover classes during their planning time. Technically, yes, they're paid for that. I agree, I understand, but that should be their planning time. So they're getting ready for that. So that helps that work-life balance. That's an hour in your day that takes from the other. So having enough substitutes, having those type of things, how do we make an impact on those type of things so that, you know, as a teacher, I would love to have my planning time, and I should have my planning time. On the other hand, how do I provide other planning times for the PLCs so that you don't lose that individual class planning time? So I think looking at maybe some schedules and how the schedule of the day looks, and how that provide teachers with more of that PLC where they're not losing that individual planning time. So I guess for me, it's really about trying to protect some of that time during the day as much as possible. And then how do we also try to remove any other additional administrative burdens that a teacher would have that's maybe a principal maybe should be picking up. And I know good principals are doing those kind of things, and that adds to culture, but it's really difficult to talk about work-life balance because all of us have an internal definition of what that looks like. And honestly, the teachers that I know and all the teachers that are on here sacrifice a lot of their time with their family for their job, or vice versa. So it's just hard to define that. It's really why I wanted to say there. It's hard to define that. So for us as administrators, when I was a principal, how do I protect that time that teachers need to that would take away from that time after, if that makes sense?
I think that makes sense. I think, and I really like what you said about like looking at what could scheduling look like that allows. I've worked in schools where I had one planning. I've worked where I've had two. That two planning was great because if I lost one, I still had the other and I can get things done, but it's not possible in every setup. So we have some hands up. I don't know who went first, but
I think it's Leslie and then Jamaica.
Perfect.
Thanks.
Thank you, and I appreciate that comment as well about scheduling. And one of the things, and this may be a little outside of the box, but I think thinking beyond what we traditionally think about when we think of scheduling, and being able to research what other industries do to help retention, especially when they're thinking about as that relates to work-life balance, and understanding that families change and they're all different. And you know, we've got folks who are trying to care for elderly parents sometimes in mid-career, as well as younger children, feeling like they can't balance it all. And what a lot of other industries really lean into is the opportunity for part-time employment. So as a teacher, are we thinking about when a teacher's leaving the field mid-career and saying, you know, I've just got to focus on my family, it's just too much? Are we providing opportunities and making it not only okay, but really championing this idea of, hey, while we want students to have a consistent teacher in the classroom, that doesn't mean you couldn't have two part-time teachers with different classes throughout the day that meet the need of that 1.0 FTE. And I know there are a lot of countries who are really looking into that and doing some things with that. So I guess what I'm getting at here is, I think when we think about scheduling and we think about work-life balance, I think we have to think creatively about, from a systems perspective, our messaging and what we're able to sort of maybe think through as potential possibilities to keep good teachers, while maybe not full-time, at least part-time in the classroom, but still being able to have them have consistent class loads and students so that they're not experiencing different teachers throughout the day. I hope that made sense.
Definitely. All right. Jamaica?
Yes, that definitely made sense. And something that I put my hand up because So as I said in my intro, I have worked in a turnaround environment quite often. So which means, you know, if the school that you're assigned is a CSI school, you get funding, etc. And so one of the things that I implemented from a systems perspective was to hire we are an arts integration school, so we have more itinerant teachers than typical. And so my teachers, they have a dedicated planning and a dedicated PLC period. And again, we have been able to do that because of the additional funding. We have had, I write grants, I jump through, you know, I do things to try to get those funds. This year, you know, I'm in Jefferson County, there's a budget difference. Next year, I have been assigned 1.5 special area teachers, 1.5 itinerant for my school. So I have a librarian and I have 1 special area teacher and then a half of one. It is impossible to continue having our schedule. Now, I know that some things are driven by policy. Is the number of itinerant teachers a school gets driven by policy? Because if it's driven by a policy that says they get a planning period, is it something that we could look at to adjust and say, hey, we have enough special area teachers to give teachers planning period every day and a PLC a week? Or again, something along those lines, because I do think that some of those structures that we have had in the past, because again, when there were plenty of teachers, it wasn't difficult to get a sub. Now it's a lot more difficult than it has been in the past. And I mentioned at the beginning KTIP, because I noticed as an administrator, a lot of, when KTIP went away, we had a lot more trouble keeping those brand new teachers. So there are I'm just wondering if there's any implications in policy or even about how schools are funded that we could look at or think about that would give more time to cover some of those. Because again, sorry, I'm at the airport, but and I just got through customs though, guys. Great job, me. At the beginning of my career as a teacher, PLC wasn't something we talked about. So are the allowances when we look for the allocation standards for itinerant teachers, are they still the same as they were 23 years ago when PLC wasn't known to be necessarily a best practice, and now it is? Are we adjusting those, or are we looking into adjusting those things so that when allocations are made or those multipliers come up, that we're looking at embedding that time? Because even me, like if I'll go and teach a class, you know, again, like Commissioner said, I'll go and teach someone's class so they can do something else. And I do that because I love teaching, but I know that I have colleagues who wouldn't unless it was forced. You understand what I'm saying? So there are some things that I think could be done, but there's also some measures of people choosing what to do and how to create their systems that make it difficult for things to be implemented across the board if they're not embedded in the policy or the system, the way that the system works.
Jamaica, I love having your perspective on this because that's super valuable to hear, like what you've been able to do and what your limitations are. That's just really valuable to me. Thank you. Suzanne?
Thank you.
Yeah, so some of the things that people have been sharing got me connecting with some things that we have tried here that have been successful. So I'm kind of the opposite of Jamaica in that I'm in a really small district. And so we have a lot more control, and it's easier to test ideas and to try things here. So we also have other limitations that we don't have the large district office and things that sometimes could be a help. But one of the things that we have done in the last few years here that have really been impactful is we completely rethought teacher attendance and sub coverage. And we have data to show that our teacher attendance is improving significantly, which is also then our student attendance is improving. Because when the teachers are there, the students are there, and like you're modeling that behavior as part of it. But we have some incentives in place for teachers, like there's incentives for perfect attendance. There's some incentives for classified staff for like paid, if they get perfect attendance awards, where they can get financial bonuses each semester. And we also have done more in the way that we recruit and pay our subs and the way that we're treating our subs, that I turn subs away. We have our positions covered. No one's asked to cover anything during their planning. And the money that we've put in to improve that system we were having to pay people to cover also during their planning, and it also then impacts instruction and it impacts teacher turnover. So there's calculations in terms of the pay being worth it. But we also then have opportunities for our teachers, because there's only so many, like, let's say, stipends that we could give people for leadership and things. We do have some stipends in place, for example, like an additional stipend on top of the regular state stipend for national board. And one of the things that we did to rethink that was, in our district, teachers, anyone in the district that has their national board continues to get that stipend no matter what their role is. So they're not blocked into a role and they don't have to take a pay cut to move into like a coaching role or something different, or administration. But we also rethought how we offer leadership opportunities. And so when we do like teacher cadres, whether it's content related or like an EL cadre or something like that, thinking maps or any of the cadres that we have across the district, people receive their extra hour pay when they're doing that. And then often what happens is those groups of teachers then lead the training for the rest of the district and are paid to do that as well. And so, which builds that capacity, but then our feedback on the professional learning surveys is much better because people are saying that they like being trained by their colleagues and they like that it's more relevant, and they can see their teachers leading. And so we've raised our extra hourly pay to reflect the different rate changes. So it's not just a flat, ours needed an update. And so that had helped too, that now, and so it's, you're paid for the time that you put into that. And if you don't come to meetings, you're not paid for that. So it's a little more of that responsive of, if you take the time to plan some extra training, you're paid for that. If you don't, then you're not. And so it's a way that we've been, and that's something that people have really responded well to here.
Yeah, that's exciting to hear. I like that creative thinking. That's what I'm hoping for with this. Let's go to the next slide. We've kind of moved into that organically. So just kind of, again, what kind of promising practices did the research point out to us? We've kind of talked about that and what we all already are doing in our own worlds for promising practices. We've talked about some celebrations. What do we want to know more about? I'd really like to think about for our next meeting, which is kind of our middle, brainstorming session meeting. What do we want to know more about? What do we want to look at and find out about and bring with us for the next meetings? Dr. Fletcher?
I would love to have more data from our Kentucky school districts that have high retention rates, especially for that mid-year, and so that we can look at what's going on in each of those districts. One district that comes to mind that they shared with me last year that they only lost 3 teachers, 3 total over the summer. 2 took higher paying jobs in another district. Okay, Justin, to your point, took higher paying jobs to another district, and 1 became a coach in another district. So, and she attributed a lot of that to local accountability and the collaboration with the local community and working together and things of that nature. But I'd love to have more data, and I'm sure it's there somewhere. And Leslie and our team here at KD probably can find that for us. But what districts have that high retention rate, especially for those teachers in that mid-year? And let's talk about what they're doing in those districts. I think that's a great spot for us.
I'm always looking for the secret sauce. Like, what is it that you're doing? I want to bottle it and sell it. Justin.
Yes.
I don't know if it's anything we look into, but I'm just going to say my dissertation was over teacher retention as it is incorporated with sponsoring extracurricular opportunities. And really what I was finding was teachers who have that connection, whether they're sponsoring a club, if they are coaching a sport, those are the ones that typically, whether that's the feeling of belonging in that community, and they were still doing that. So when I was looking at our numbers for our district and even surrounding districts, what we were seeing is, if you look at the retention, a lot of the people that were leaving weren't connected, right? So they weren't connected. But it's not, and don't hear me say it, it's not to say, okay, well, let's make one more thing added to the plate, right? Like, hopefully we're building, like, what is your passion as a teacher? So if I'm social studies and I'm going to do student council or KYA, great, but make sure that we're paying for that, but knowing that hopefully in the long run, if we're paying our teachers to sponsor those activities, it's going to pay dividends over the long run because we're not having to retrain teachers up again. So that's something maybe we can look into. I don't know how you really look in that and find more information about it, but I know that there was at least a correlation there.
I don't doubt it. In our stay interviews, I didn't really talk about this, but in the folder full of goodies that you guys got, Go Teach ambassadors and alumni have been conducting stay interviews in their schools and districts, and they're in their spheres of influence, I guess, with teachers. And we've tried really hard to get them from all different experience bands. But almost all of them, when you say, why do you stay? They say, I love my kids. And so if they've been able to, I think to Justin's point, if they've been able to make that connection, and I do think, I mean, that nothing bonds you more than taking them on a field trip somewhere and you have memories forever of whatever disaster might have happened. Nothing bonds you more than those kinds of things, and spending time with them. Still, I think about that, my own personal experience from high school. So yeah, I think there has to be a correlation between participating in the community of the school and feeling that belonging culture. I think so. We'll definitely kind of look at that. Anything else you guys are curious about that we want to maybe dig into? I would love to hear more about some creative scheduling.
Ellie, Tara's got her hand.
Yes, Tara, great.
I agree
Thanks,
with
Tara.
that creative scheduling. That was interesting. And I was just going to comment on, some of what we've learned about teachers having opportunities for other leadership endeavors, such as the National Board Certification. I would be curious what other kinds of opportunities are there for teachers, and have those, such as the national boards, has that helped teachers stay engaged with the profession? And what opportunities did getting a certification like that bring for them?
There is a statistic somewhere that, if I dust off my thinking cap, that talks about the retention rates of national board certified teachers being, I don't want to say a number because it would just be me pulling it out of my ear, but it's a lot. It's a good chunk of national board certified teachers stay. Amber?
Coming from a small rural district here in Southeast Kentucky, I would like to kind of see how rural schools do it. I've been teaching 21 years here in the same district, and we've went from, like I said, I'm a special educator. When I first started, there were probably 50 of us across the district, K-12, and now there's less than 20 of us, but our caseloads are much more. So I would like to see what the correlation is of special education teachers coming and joining the field and leaving the field. And that's something that I might ask Mr. Crawford when we get done with this is, how can we get people more enticed? Because at my school, we're always needing help. Like I've got quite a few on my caseload and I need help, but people are not applying for those positions. So that's what I would like to see, and be able to retain those people that I've trained over the years and see them fulfill and have, help my students, because that's why I stay in this field is because I love my kids. So I would like to kind of see how rural districts do it. We're talking about the creative scheduling. As teachers, we don't get too involved in the scheduling. That comes from our administrative standpoint, but also having the extra able bodies to help us as well.
Yeah. And there was one of our research articles was focused on rural schools, and they have a whole separate, like, it's just a whole different animal. Like, you're looking at different, these are apples and oranges when you're looking at an urban setting versus a rural setting, different challenges, different positives. I mean, it's just, there's a lot to consider. So yeah, I would definitely be interested. And we know that our special education pipeline is lacking. It's a hard fill. What kind of creative things can we do to entice people into special education? I think that's really important. I have a former student that I talked to his grandmother a couple of weeks ago and said, yeah, he's going to be a special ed teacher, and he wants to do the severe needs. And I was like, that he's going to be so awesome at that. But it just kind of surprised me that was the path that he was going to take. But I'm excited for him. So he'll be in the class. He'll be teaching in another 6 months or a year. So that's exciting, but just few and far between.
And I think there also may be research, because I think that the special ed shortage impacts other factors, right? If I'm supposed to have a collab teacher in my room and there's not one, then I'm a general ed teacher who is trying to navigate giving accommodations, et cetera, and there's not a person there. Also, it's very difficult. I know in our district, it's very difficult to hire assistants. Classified staff makes it difficult to keep folks in some of those positions, the severe. But I think that I'd be curious to know if there was what kind of direct correlation there was between that special education teacher shortage and teacher retention as a whole, because it is difficult. Well, I mean, that's the reason IDEA exists, right? Because students need additional supports. And so if we've got subs in some of those positions that would normally provide that additional certified support, that also across the board can be difficult. And for a teacher who is in a self-contained placement that needs 2 assistants and can barely get 1, that also makes it difficult to stay in there.
Absolutely. I mean, that it impacts everything, and it kind of how it is. It's a domino effect, and we know, but yeah, it's exciting. That's an interesting question to look at. I don't remember what's on our next slide. I think we're pretty close to the end, though, if we want to look at the next one. Oh, well, we've kind of talked about this, but I do want to focus on this second bullet on there. So what are some strategies that might work? We're exploring that. What's within our control? And I think that goes to a lot. What can we influence, and what opportunities do we have? We are a small but mighty group. We have a lot of personal influence, but I'm not sure we're not going to be able to get, a minimum starting salary of $50,000 for teachers out of this group's suggestion. So what is reasonable? What can we impact? And where can we start to chip away at some of the big things that are causing the retention issues that we have? So anything about that before we wrap up? I think when you look at, we've got the Kentucky Board of Education that has policy influence. We have the Education Professional Standards Board that has policy influence. That's when those circles overlap. That's kind of where our sweet spot is. What can we push forward through there?
I don't know if this is a place where that could intersect or does, and I don't know the exact policy, but I'd heard, when honestly I can't keep track of all of the policy, but there's something out there that is some kind of a requirement, I think, for principal training, new principal training or something. Anyways, there may be a way to embed some of the strategies that work within the required superintendent training and if there is a required new principal training or something, because I could see in a big district it being really important that principals would have some of that, because there might be some things you can control at a school level. Well, I mean, it would be helpful for any principal really, that there's some things you can control at a school level that you can't control without, no matter what the district is doing. You might have some influence in your building, the things you can handle, but then also some things that superintendents might need to know. And I don't know if that, I doubt that's already on their training.
Awesome. And that is something that the Professional Standards Board for sure could definitely influence that in some ways. Anything else about that? Leslie?
This to tying back the impact survey is, having lived that experience from an educator and an administrator, is a lot of folks really don't know what to do with the impact survey results. And so I think if we could point out some of these questions that tie really close, like workload, like student behavior, like teacher voice and decision making, the leadership piece, even the professional learning piece, if we could tie back some sort of tool that districts could then look at and say, okay, when we're talking about retention, how did we fare in these particular areas? Not the entire survey, but really connect some ones and then give them some sort of bright spots of where we've collected maybe evidence or strategies that districts that have been successful with those specific areas, that we could kind of give them. So if they look at it and say, okay, our teachers are really not scoring us very well on this particular aspect, here are some resources or some ideas that we've pulled from across the state where people feel like they've done really well with that, and maybe kind of have a backdoor approach to retention by addressing some of their deficit areas that are maybe evident in the impact results. Just a thought.
That is an Ellie Gilbert dream. I'll just tell you, that is something I've been consistently working on. It's just, it's a lot, and we need a lot of people to help us collect that. Tara, I think, had her hand up.
Tara, you are muted.
Forget to hit that button every time. No, I was just going to piggyback off of what Leslie said. In fact, I was thinking about saying something very similar, in that I would love for this group or an even larger group to come up with some type of guidance document, or just bulleted points of ideas on how to address some of these needs that we're seeing, and causes of individuals to leave the profession, especially during that mid-year range. Tips and techniques that other districts, have implemented and found success, that, we could make other districts aware of across the Commonwealth. Like Dr. Fletcher said, reach out to those districts that have had very low retention and see what they're doing. And then let's put that information out there for them to use.
Love it. Anything else on this strategy discussion? All right, next slide. All right, so next steps. We will meet again. If this time works, which I think it did for most of us, if you have conflicts, you can talk to me, but I think we will stick with this time. But we will meet again on March 10th. I'll have your summary, and we have like all the notes will be uploaded to our shared drive. Probably sooner than Tuesday, but it might take me that long. In the meantime, what I would really ask of you is that you get into your networks and you find out some of those things that are working, and you can bring those back to share, to give us places to look for bright spots, who's got some really crazy schedule that's just working wonders for their teachers, who's doing something out of the ordinary that maybe we haven't thought of. So just get into your communities, dig around, and try to find those things. Keep reading. If there are new things that come out, you find new pieces of data that you'd like to share, we'd be glad to kind of assemble those as well. Keep thinking and noticing patterns. I think that's key, just to notice what's working well and what's not, and thinking about how we can help mid-career teachers continue to thrive. They are really like powerful instruments for educational change. They're experts in their field. They know how to teach. They know what's going on, and losing them is just, I mean, that's just a huge punch to the gut to lose those mid-career teachers, because they are really powerful for us. So we want to focus on building systems where they thrive, where we strengthen schools from within, where we're not having to constantly refill our pipeline because there's a leak in it. So anything for the good of the cause before we dismiss? Is everyone clear on, we're going to go in search of the most creative answers, bring something interesting back to share? Well, all right, we're going to wrap up a few minutes early. If you come across anything, if you have questions, shoot me an email. I'd be glad to talk to you about that in the meantime. But until then, I'll see you guys on March 10th.
Thank you.
Thanks.